I graduated on a Saturday in May 23 years ago. My daughter was 8 years old, sitting in the third row with her grandmother, wearing a yellow dress with white buttons down the front. She clapped so hard when they called my name that my mother had to grab her hands to quiet her down. That's the image I carry with me. That little girl in the yellow dress, so proud she couldn't contain it. I thought about that image a lot this past spring. I thought about it when I was standing in my kitchen at 6 in the morning, reading a text on my phone that made my hands go cold. Mum, we've decided to keep the graduation ceremony just for close family. Kira's parents will be there and we want to keep it small. We hope you understand. That was it. That was the whole message, from my son who I raised alone for 19 years after his father left. My son, whose college applications I proofread at midnight after double shifts at the hospital. My son, who called me crying his first semester because the roommate situation was unbearable and he didn't know how to talk to the housing office. My son, who I lent $42,000 to for his first 2 years of graduate school because his financial aid package didn't cover living expenses in the city. $42,000. Not a gift, a loan, because that's how he wanted it. He was proud about it. He said he'd pay me back when he finished his PhD and got a real job. I said fine. I believed him. He was graduating with his doctorate that June. 5 years of work, and I wasn't invited. I sat down at the kitchen table and I didn't cry. I think I was too stunned to cry. I just sat there with my coffee going cold and read that message 4 more times, as if the words might rearrange themselves into something that made sense. I should tell you a little about who I am, because context matters here. My name is Harriet. I'm 62 years old. I worked as a registered nurse for 31 years, the last 15 of them in the ICU at a regional hospital in Ohio. I retired early, not because I wanted to, but because my knees made it impossible to be on my feet for 12-hour shifts anymore. I live in the same house I bought when my son, Marcus, was 3 years old. 4 bedrooms because I had plans back then. Those plans changed. It ended up just being the 2 of us, and I made that work. Marcus's father, my ex-husband, was out of the picture by the time Marcus started kindergarten. Not dramatically. No affairs, no blow-ups. He just decided fatherhood wasn't for him and moved to Portland and eventually stopped calling. Marcus stopped asking about him around age 12, and I took that as a sign that we had both made our peace with it in our different ways. I did everything myself. Everything. The school pickups and the soccer practices and the science fair projects and the college visits and the FAFSA forms and the phone calls with financial aid officers and the moving boxes and the apartment deposits. I'm not listing these things to claim a prize. I'm listing them because they are the evidence, the record of a life I built around another person. And that person sent me a text at 6 in the morning telling me I wasn't close enough family to watch him walk across a stage. Kira's parents would be there. I'd met Kira's parents exactly once, at a dinner Marcus arranged about a year into their relationship. Her father, a corporate attorney named, well, I'll call him what Marcus always called him, which was Sir, because apparently that was the dynamic, had barely spoken to me the entire evening. Her mother had commented twice on my practical shoes. Kira herself was pleasant enough on the surface, smart, well put together, the kind of woman who schedules her emotions in advance. But I had noticed, over the 2 years Marcus had been with her, that my phone calls with my son got shorter, that the holidays got complicated, that I started getting information about my own son's life from his social media instead of from him. I noticed. I didn't say much about it because I know how that story goes. The mother who speaks up becomes the problem. I had seen enough of those situations in my life to know that the only leverage a mother has, sometimes, is patience and silence. But there is a limit to silence. I put the phone down on the table. I went upstairs and I made my bed. Slowly, the way I always do, tucking the corners in properly. I took a shower. I made myself a real breakfast instead of just toast. And while I was eating, I thought about what I actually had the power to do. Here is something nobody tells you when you are lending money to your adult child. When the loan is informal, when it exists in texts and emails and a Word document you both signed at the kitchen table, it is still a legal obligation, but the enforceability depends entirely on documentation. I had documentation. Every transfer, every amount, every date, saved in a folder on my computer that I'd been maintaining out of pure nursing brain habit. I am a person who documents things. 23 years in clinical settings will do that to you. I also had something else. 18 months earlier, Marcus had asked me to co-sign a lease on the apartment where he and Kira were living. His income as a graduate student was irregular, and the landlord required either a co-signer or 6 months of rent up front. He didn't have 6 months up front, so I co-signed. My name was on that lease alongside his. I didn't do anything with that information that morning, I just held it. I thought about it the way you think about a door you haven't opened yet. I called my sister that evening. She's 4 years younger than me, lives in Tennessee, and has the particular quality of being honest with me, even when I don't want her to be. I told her what happened. There was a long silence on her end of the line. "What are you going to do?" she asked. "I don't know yet," I said. "Are you going to call him?" I thought about it. What would I say? He said what he said. He knew what it meant when he wrote it. He might not have thought it through. "He has a doctorate," I said. "He thought it through." She laughed a little at that, and I laughed too, and then we were both quiet. "Harriet," she said finally, "you have given that boy everything." "I know. So what are you going to do?" I looked out the window at my backyard. The hydrangeas I planted the summer Marcus left for college were in full bloom. I planted them because I needed something to take care of that summer, something that required regular attention and would show up again the following year, regardless of what else was happening. "I'm going to take a trip," I said. "I've been meaning to go to Savannah. My friend from nursing school lives there now. I'll go the week of his graduation." My sister was quiet for a moment. "That's it. For now," I said. What I didn't tell her, what I didn't tell anyone, was that 2 days after receiving that text, I had sent a carefully worded certified letter to the management office of Marcus and Kira's apartment building. Not threatening, not angry, just informational. I wanted it on record that as co-signer I was providing 30 days notice of my intent to remove my name from the lease at renewal, which was coming up in 8 weeks. Standard process, within my legal rights. I had already spoken with a tenants' rights attorney to confirm this. The letter went out on a Tuesday morning. I also sent Marcus an email. Just one. I kept it short because I knew anything longer would become ammunition, would be read aloud to Kira and analysed and used to paint me as unstable or dramatic. "Marcus, I received your message. I've decided to make other plans for that weekend. I hope the ceremony goes well. I want you to know that I've been reviewing our financial arrangement and will be reaching out about the loan repayment timeline in the coming weeks. I also wanted to let you know I've begun the process of removing myself as co-signer from your lease, as I mentioned I would do when it came up for renewal. This isn't punitive, it's just practical. Love, Mum." He didn't respond for 4 days. When he did respond, the message was longer than I expected. He said I was being passive-aggressive. He said the graduation was a small thing and I was making it bigger than it needed to be. He said Kira's family was just more formal and they had wanted a contained event, and he had been trying to respect that. He said the co-signer thing was completely out of nowhere and that pulling out now would create serious problems for them. He said he hoped I would reconsider. I read it twice. I noticed there was no apology in it. There was an explanation, and there was a request, but there was no apology. I wrote back, "I understand. I've made my decision. Let's talk when you're ready to discuss the repayment schedule. I love you." That was all. My friend's name is Angie, and she has lived in Savannah for 12 years now, in a house on a street lined with live oaks, Spanish moss hanging down like curtains. She is one of the few people in my life who knew me before I was a mother, who knew me when I was young and uncertain and working night shifts and trying to figure out who I was. She made a bed up for me in her guest room, and she didn't ask me too many questions, and she took me to eat shrimp and grits at a place by the river, and we walked and talked, and I slept 9 hours a night, which I hadn't done in months. On the Saturday of Marcus's graduation, I woke up early, as I always do. I made coffee and sat on Angie's porch and watched the light come through the oak trees. I had my phone with me. I told myself I would check it once in the morning and once in the evening and not in between. At 9:17 in the morning, I had 3 missed calls from Marcus. At 10,004, a text, "Mum, call me." Something happened. At 10,041, a voicemail I could see but hadn't listened to yet. At 11,013, a text from a number I didn't recognize. "Harriet, This is Thomas. I'm Kira's father. I'm sorry to contact you like this, but Marcus gave me your number. I wonder if you might have a few minutes to speak. I sat with that for a moment. Thomas. Sir, the corporate attorney who had barely spoken to me at dinner and whose wife had commented on my shoes. I called him back. He answered on the first ring. His voice was different from what I remembered. Quieter, less boardroom. He apologized for reaching out directly. He said he wanted me to know that the situation that morning had been, in his words, entirely avoidable and reflects very poorly on some choices that were made without my knowledge. I asked him what had happened. What had happened was this. The apartment management company, upon receiving my letter, had immediately flagged the lease for review. When they reviewed it, they found a provision in the original lease agreement, one that Marcus had apparently glossed over, that stated if a cosigner withdrew, the remaining tenant was required to either provide a new cosigner or demonstrate independent income sufficient to qualify for the unit. Marcus's graduate stipend did not meet that threshold. Kira's income, as she was still completing her own degree, did not either. The management company had contacted them 3 weeks earlier with this information. Marcus had not told me. He had apparently assumed, hoped, that the situation would resolve itself somehow, or that I would back down, or that Kira's father would step in. Kira's father had in fact offered to co-sign the new lease. What he had not offered to do, and what had apparently been the source of a significant argument that very morning, graduation morning, was pretend that the entire chain of events had not occurred. I told my daughter, Thomas said, his voice careful and measured, that what was done to you was wrong. I have told her this more than once. I want you to know that I did not support the decision to exclude you. I was told it was what you wanted. I should have called you directly to confirm that, and I did not, and I regret that. I was quiet for a moment. I appreciate you telling me, I said. Marcus is a good young man, he said. I believe that, but he allowed himself to be guided poorly in this matter, and I think part of him knows that. He asked me to call you because he couldn't make himself do it. I thought about that. My son, who had a doctorate in engineering, who could defend a dissertation in front of a committee of experts, who could not make himself call his own mother on the morning of his graduation. Tell him, I said, that I'm glad he finished. Tell him I'm proud of the work. Tell him that when he's ready to talk, really talk, not negotiate, I'll be here. Thomas was quiet for a moment. Then he said, You're a remarkable woman, Harriet. I'm sorry you weren't there today. I thanked him and I hung up the phone. Angie had come out onto the porch by then with a second cup of coffee for me. She hadn't heard the conversation, but she read my face, because that is what 30 years of friendship looks like. Everything okay? She asked. Getting there, I said. We sat on that porch for another hour. The light kept coming through the oak trees. The Spanish moss moved in the warm breeze. Somewhere down the street, someone was mowing their lawn, that particular summer sound that always makes me think of Saturdays. When Marcus was small, when he would follow the neighbour's riding mower with a plastic one of his own, perfectly serious, convinced he was helping. My phone buzzed twice more that afternoon. I left it in my pocket. It wasn't until the following Thursday that Marcus called. Not a text, a call. I was in my kitchen, making soup, the kind I used to make every Sunday when he was growing up. Chicken and vegetables, simple and good. I let it ring twice before I answered, not to punish him, just to take a breath. Mum, he said. Hi, sweetheart. And then he said something I hadn't heard from him in a long time. He said, I'm sorry. I'm actually sorry. I'm not calling to work something out. I just need to say that what I did was wrong, and I knew it was wrong when I did it, and I did it anyway, and I can't fix that. But I wanted you to know that I know. I turned the heat down on the soup. I sat down at the kitchen table. I thought about 1,000 things in the space of about 4 seconds. 26 years of mornings and dinners and school plays and late nights and everything I had ever done, and everything I had ever done, and everything he had ever been. And then I let most of it go, the way you let go of breath you've been holding too long. Thank you, I said. That matters. Kira and we're having some conversations, he said. I think there were things I let slide for too long. I didn't say anything about that. It wasn't my place, not yet. The loan, he said. I want to set up a real repayment schedule. Something formal. I should have done that a year ago. We'll figure it out, I said. And the cosigner thing, Thomas is handling that, so that's fine. But I want you to know I'm not angry about it. You were within your rights. I was, I said simply. There was. Not an uncomfortable one. More like two people standing in the same room after a long time apart, getting used to the dimensions of it again. I got my diploma, he said. In the mail. It came today. Congratulations, I said, and I meant it, completely and without anything else attached to it. You worked hard for that. I thought about you, he said. Walking across the stage. I thought about how you used to come to every single thing. Elementary school, middle school, high school, you were always there. I didn't say anything. I kept looking for you, he said. Out of habit, I guess. Or not habit. I don't know what it was. I know what it was, I said. He was quiet. It's okay, I told him. We're going to be okay, but Marcus, it's going to take time. You understand that? Yeah, he said. I do. And I need you to understand something else. I am your mother, and I love you without conditions. But I am also a person, and what I give to you, my time, my money, my presence, those things have value. They don't just exist because I'm your mother. They exist because I choose to give them. And that choice depends on how I'm treated. He was quiet for a long time. I understand, he said finally. I stirred the soup. The kitchen smelled the way it always had on Sunday afternoons. Come for dinner next month, I said. Just you, we can talk more then. Okay, he said. Yeah. I'd like that. After we hung up, I sat at the table for a few minutes. I wasn't sad exactly. I wasn't triumphant either. I was something closer to still, the kind of still that comes after a long time of bracing for impact, when the impact has finally come and passed and you realize you are still standing. I have been thinking a lot these past few months about what it means to love someone without losing yourself in the process. I spent so many years believing that a mother's love required total self-erasure, that to love fully was to ask for nothing back, to need nothing back, to pour and expect the vessel to stay full on its own. I believed that asking for respect was the same as demanding payment. I believed that having limits meant loving less. I don't believe those things anymore. My hydrangeas bloomed this summer, same as they do every summer. I repotted 2 of them and moved them to the back corner of the yard where they get better afternoon light. They're doing better there. Sometimes the things you've been tending in one place need to be moved to somewhere they can really grow. Marcus came for dinner in July. We ate on the back porch, the 2 of us, and we talked for 3 hours about everything and nothing. His research, my retirement, the neighbour's new dog, a memory he had from 2nd grade that I had completely forgotten about. He helped me clean up afterward, the way he used to when he was a teenager, drying the dishes and putting them away without being asked. At the door before he left, he hugged me. A real hug, not the polite kind. I've missed you, Mum, he said. I've missed you too, I said. And I meant it. I had missed him, the real him, the one who existed before he started managing me instead of knowing me. That version of my son had come back to my kitchen and eaten soup and dried dishes and stood at my door in the summer evening. And I was grateful for that, genuinely, and without reservation. But I also knew, as I watched his car back out of the driveway, that the woman who let herself be handed a text and quietly accepted it, that version of me was gone. She had gone to Savannah and sat on a porch and let the Spanish moss and the river light and 30 years of friendship do their work, and she had come home different. Stronger, I think, or maybe just more honest about what I had always been. I went back inside. I washed my coffee cup and turned off the porch light and locked the door, the same things I do every night. But I did them differently that evening, more deliberately, like someone who has remembered, after a long time away, that her home is her own. I've had a lot of time to sit with everything that happened, and the thing that strikes me most now isn't the text, or the missed calls, or even the conversation with Thomas on that Saturday morning in Savannah. What strikes me is how long I had been slowly accepting less and calling it love. I think that's the honest version of this story. Not that my son was a villain, not that Kira was the cause of everything, but that I had spent years making myself smaller and quieter and more convenient. And at some point, Marcus stopped seeing the choice in that. He stopped understanding that what I gave him cost me something. He thought it was simply what I was, a woman who existed to support, to fund, to show up, and then disappear when her presence became complicated. The consequences he faced weren't something I engineered out of anger. I sent that letter to the management office because I had finally started treating my own decisions with the same seriousness I'd always given his. I had co-signed that lease as a favor, and when he made clear I wasn't part of his family in the ways that mattered, it became reasonable to stop putting my financial name behind his life. That's not revenge. That's just what happens when you stop giving without accounting for it. Actions have weight. Every choice carries what comes next inside it, whether we acknowledge that or not. What I want people to take from this, especially women my age, especially mothers, is that having limits is not the same as withdrawing love. Marcus needed to understand that my time, my money, my presence are things I choose to give. That choice is meaningful precisely because it can be withheld. A gift that cannot be taken back is not a gift. It becomes an expectation, and expectations without gratitude become entitlement very quickly. That's the intelligence part, knowing the difference between love and obligation, and refusing to let the two get confused. I spent too many years believing that a good mother didn't keep score, but there's a difference between keeping score and simply knowing your own worth. One is bitterness, the other is wisdom. I had to get to 62 years old to learn that distinction clearly, and I wish I had learned it sooner. And the resilience, the part where I booked the trip, packed my bag, and went to sit on Angie's porch instead of sitting by my phone, waiting to be needed, that was the most important thing I did. Not for leverage, not to make a point, because I had a life of my own, and it deserved to be lived. Marcus had to experience what it felt like when I was genuinely, peacefully elsewhere. Not punishing him, just living. That's something I hadn't done fully in a very long time. He came back. Not because I forced him to, not because Thomas intervened, but because somewhere in the quiet after the chaos, he found his own way to what was true. And I was here when he did. Not desperate, not bitter, just here. That's all I ever wanted to be.